Look at that guy. He's so happy because he thinks he just bought a fun project he can wrench on in his spare time and have a cool, sporty convertible to drive around. Well, that was me. That was July of 2015. And really, what I had just bought was a rolling disaster that I'm honestly surprised the owner even managed to drive out to meet me when I purchased it from him. In the background, you can also see my beloved old Subaru wagon, which I don't own anymore. But family owns it, so I can still see it sometimes when I miss it. So I bought this car because I wanted a fun project, and it's a 2001 Toyota MR2 Spyder with 98,000 miles on the clock in this picture. So I got it back. I started cleaning it up. It was filthy. The only stuff I knew about it was that it had at least a valve cover leak. It seemed to be burning a little bit of oil, and the catalytic converter seemed to be pretty plugged up. All pretty manageable stuff, and I got it for a decent price, although in retrospect I probably overpaid considering all the stuff that was wrong with it that I don't even think that the original owner was aware of. So it was absolutely filthy. So I spent a little bit of time cleaning it up, trying to figure out where I was at. And then I got it into the garage, or actually not my garage, but my in-laws' garage, where I spent a lot of time last fall. And unfortunately, they've moved away from there, so I don't have access to that garage anymore. And I moved a few hours away, so I don't have access to it regardless. And I got into the garage, started looking into the catalytic converter issue, and quickly decided that the cat was completely clogged up. So I went ahead and grabbed a Magnaflow cat pipe. There aren't many cat pipes for Spyders, but I got this one. And I also got this cool eBay header because the stock header was completely gummed up as well. And the pre-cats in it were the cause of all the oil burning issues, which I hadn't really discovered yet. And if you want more information about that, you can easily Google it. But early model Spyders had severe issues with oil burning if certain things weren't taken care of ahead of time. And on this car, they weren't. So got that header, got the Magnaflow cat pipe. We cut the heat shield mounts off the header because they look kind of dumb and we didn't really like the stainless look. And then my father-in-law sandblasted it. So it looked this really nice matte gray color, and when I drove the car a few times, it got this really, really awesome bluish, grayish, reddish color to it, although that did fade with time. It was really down on power when I bought it because the catalytic converter was 100% clogged, so I did take it for a nice little drive without any cat pipe or muffler hooked up just to see what it was like, and man, did that thing sound good. But the more I diagnosed stuff, the more I figured out that the oil burning was not something that could actually be fixed reliably. The car was burning about a quart of oil every 50 miles, which is absolutely ridiculous. I went on a 200-mile trip and it almost ran out of oil on the trip. So decided that the only thing I could do was either junk the car or get another engine for it. So I decided to buy one. I got this 1ZZ engine out of a 2007 wrecked Toyota Matrix with about 80,000 miles on it, and it arrived in October. So it arrives late October of 2015, and I park my car in my in-laws' garage and get to work pulling it apart. Here you can see that I test fit the exhaust before I started pulling the rest of the car apart, and we went back to it and made it fit up a little bit better by the time the project was actually over. But here I am draining all the fluids out of it, starting to just get everything ready to be taken apart. Here's a workbench. This is about as neat as it ever looked. It was usually covered in a lot more tools than that, and I tried my best to keep everything organized. Here I've removed everything but the transmission and the engine. It's all ready to come out. And here's the motorcycle jack I used to get the engine out, because you can't actually get the engine out through the top like you can in most cars. The engine and transmission and rear crossmember have to be lowered out of the bottom of the car, which necessitated cutting some stuff and chaining some stuff to other stuff and a lot of finagling, and it took about 4 hours after everything was disconnected just to get the stupid engine out of the car and back here on the floor where you can see it, which is where it spent the next month while I did stuff to it. I also did some other things like installing this bracing plate underneath the car and cleaning out the interior because it was absolutely trashed. There was old moldy dog food, people food, the seats were dirty. Everything was just in terrible, terrible shape, so I put a little work into getting that all good. I did the traditional tall guy, small car sun visor delete. Haven't really noticed any negative effects because of that. And finally, the day after Thanksgiving, 2015, she started. 2 weeks after that, I finally had the car in good enough shape I could at least turn it around in the yard. Which was good because 2 weeks after that, my wife and I moved a couple 100 miles away. So now I only have this driveway to work in, and it's a little bit harder to do big projects, but I still have this car and I love it, and I've got a couple other project cars you'll see more about in future videos, but that's for another day because I could finally drive this thing. So didn't really drive it much during the winter. We had some snow and some bad weather, but I did drive it to Tail of the Dragon in Tennessee with some friends in April, and we had a really awesome time tearing through the mountains over there, and it was kind of a bit of a proving ground for the car to make sure everything worked and make sure that all the mods I'd done to it made sense and everything, and it did a great job, and I had an absolute blast. And I came home and knew a couple things I wanted to change, but that brings us to today, and here's a walk around I filmed just the other day to kind of get you up to speed on where the car is right now, and then I'll talk about some future plans I have for it. Alright, I didn't really clean up the engine bay or anything because it normally looks like this, and I didn't want to make it look any different for the video, but let me just show you kind of where I'm at and what I've done to the car so far. So one of the most immediately noticeable things is there used to be a really big air box here. The air filter was here, and then the intake went around there, around the fluid reservoir, and into this fender right here, so it can grab air from the side vent. That's an actual functional side vent, as opposed to a lot of cars that are there just for looks. The engine's in the mid of the car here, so it has to have that. I replaced that with a PPE short ram cold air intake. Most of the intakes for this car do not actually make more power than the stock intake. That's actually something that a lot of owners get wrong. This is one of the few ones that does. So it does cut torque just a little bit, but increases your top end power only 3 to 5 horsepower. But the biggest reason was I wanted to free up some room in here, and I didn't like how the stock airbox looked. So unfortunately, because of that, now I've got this kind of mess of vacuum hoses, coolant hoses, wires and stuff that just hangs there, where before it had something to clip to, but it's not too bad. The biggest thing I want to change sometime in the future are these stud nuts there. Are starting to rust up. They're very cheap. I don't like them at all, and replacing the stud nuts and probably the studs is an upcoming project for another time. Now it's going to be a little bit hard to tell, but the stock muffler used to take up a huge amount of space back here, pretty much all that free space you can see right there. So the new muffler has actually got 2 cans that look just like that one. They're side by side. It takes up quite a bit less space, and around the back here it exits out to those dual tips. Now the hole in the bumper is centered, but the tips themselves, the exhaust, wasn't quite made to the specs that I was hoping it was going to be, and it's not quite centered. So it's a little bit off center, but you can only tell if you're really crouching down behind the car and looking. But that is a Che style Lotus exhaust. Originally the exhaust came out over there. Now it comes out over here. Not that big of a difference, but this exhaust is a bit raspier. And a guy in Craigslist was selling this exhaust brand new for $100 because he didn't know what car it went to, because it's a complete, muffler and muffler back system, which from most cars would be 4 to 5 feet long or something. On this car, it's curled up like spaghetti and only a couple feet long. So he had no idea what it was for, was willing to let it go for a pretty cheap price. All right, here are the metal shifter bushings. These are the cable bushings that go right on top of the transmission. There's 2 of them. This is the only one that's that easy to see. The other one is right underneath there. And I replaced those because the stock bushings were rubber. They were very worn out, and even though these are starting to tarnish, they give a much firmer shifter feel, and they've really firmed the shifter up, made it feel a ton better. You can see the way I've held some of those coolant hoses onto the original frame because now they can't go onto the intake box like they used to. This piece back here used to be a pretty light faded gray, and I didn't really care for it, so I plasti dipped that black along with these side vents. So they still look a little bit gray. I mean, it's not perfect, but they used to be a really, really faded gray color, and now they're a bit more black, which I definitely prefer. These are some Rota knockoff wheels. I forget the exact name of the wheels, but I got these really cheap from a friend who was looking to unload them. He hadn't been able to use them in a while, and they had a variety of different finishes on them, and they didn't look very good. But I was going to tail the Dragon pretty soon when I got them, and I just needed something that I could put new tires on that wasn't all chipped and scratched up like the stock wheels. So I got them. I plasti dipped them a little gold. They've got more green in them than I'd like, but they're not too bad. And the plasti dip has held up surprisingly well. I'm not crazy about them. These are not the wheels that I'll probably keep long term if I keep the car long term. But they're pretty good, and they were the right price, so that's what matters. I replaced the brake pads and the brake rotors when I was doing all the other stuff to the car. They're just stock. I mean, there's nothing special about them. It's a very light car. It handles great. It doesn't really need a ton in braking unless I was going to be tracking it on a regular basis. So these brakes are fantastic. I really don't have any complaints. I replaced the struts with regular KYB struts. They're like 10% stiffer than stock, but they're pretty much just to replace the old struts that were on the car that had like 100,000 miles and 15 years on them. But I also got some Tein S-Tech lowering springs. They lowered the car about 1.5 inches all the way around. I got rid of the huge wheel well gap that didn't really look that good stock. They don't really do a lot for the ride either way, but they're fine as is. The stock seats were really uncomfortable, so these seats are out of a Celica GTS. They're leather. They're pretty much the same as the stock ones, except they've got that gap in the headrest. They've got a bit more lumbar support, and they're a lot cushier. And they bolt right onto the stock rails, stock seat belt, everything like that. None of that needed to be adjusted, which is awesome. Great Toyota stuff there. And they weren't a big deal. I just found them used. Took about a couple hours to swap them out. No big deal. I will pay a not insignificant amount of money to someone who can for sure tell me what that button does, because I've pressed it with the car on and off. I can't tell that it's doing anything. I have no idea what it's for. I haven't been able to find it on forums. I haven't been able to find it in the manual. What the heck does this button do? Spyder logo in the middle of the steering wheel has worn off, but I don't really care about that much. I actually kind of like how it looks as is, so I don't think I'm ever going to fix that or try to fix it. I think I'm just going to leave it like it is. If it ever really bothers me, I could, you know, get a Celica wheel or something to replace it with, but this has an airbag. I'm probably going to leave it stock. I don't really want to mess with that. I don't have a lot of experience with airbags. Now, if you want to open the front trunk thing, you got to go in here and you got to pull that lever, because if you want to open the actual trunk where the engine is, so it's a little bit like opening the hood, you've got a lever down here by the gas release. If you've never seen a Spyder before, this is literally all the storage space in the car are these two cubbies right behind the seats. That's it. You can pack for a weekend if you pack very lightly and like just use backpacks or something, but really not a lot of storage. Currently, the most neglected area of the car, other than that transmission noise, is under the hood here. You can see lots and lots of residue from where I fixed the headlights. They were really, really yellow when I got the car. They were just disgusting. And I fixed them, but I didn't shut the hood, and I really should have, because it threw this residue all over the inside of the car. And it looks pretty terrible, so I haven't put it's called the frunk cover, I haven't put back in here yet. But in here is the spare tire and most of the storage space in the car. So some long-term project, when it gets a little bit cooler outside, is going to be go through and methodically clean this. I keep cleaning out leaves and stuff. They keep building up in there. But I need to really clean the inside of this thing really, really well. And I've owned the car for over a year, still haven't got around to doing that. Plasti dipped the badges on the back here, blacked those out. Didn't do a great job of them. I just did a real quick job to match when I plasti dipped the bottom grill there. But long-term, I'm probably going to remove them from the car or something. I'm also learning how to detail cars, so I did paint correction to the Spyder earlier in the year, but I'm still pretty new at it, and the paint was really, really trashed because I think it's been outside most of its life, so I made it look a little bit better. It's maybe a 10-foot car instead of a 50-foot car, but it's not quite there yet. But anyway, guys, there's been other things, but I don't want to make this video longer than it needs to be. I just wanted to catch you all up to speed on what I've done to the Spyder so far and my journey with it. Because as all you guys know, if you have a project car, there's 1,000 little things you've done to it and 1,000 little other things you want to do to it, and it's never quite complete. But on this channel, I'm going to be documenting all my efforts to get the car back to where I want it to be and get it up to snuff. And I'm going to have a lot of fun autocrossing it, maybe doing a couple track days and just having fun driving it around, because I love this thing. I probably won't have it forever, but I'm going to have it for a while longer and I want to enjoy it. So thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up, consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.